without any warning of any kind, all of a sudden there was a terrific explosion, and a gas flame about 50 feet high roared into the air, and the bodies were laying all over the arena. It was the most horrible spectacle that I ever witnessed. I cannot understand how it happened, and it was so fast that no one had an opportunity to get away from it. The people were screaming and the flames were going on, and immediately I got into the police car, and the car radio had already received the notice of this, and every ambulance and every police car was ordered to come out to the fairgrounds immediately to take care of this catastrophe. I hope that as long as I live, nothing else like this will happen in the city of Indianapolis.
October 31st, 1963, the night when a performance of the Holiday on Ice show turned into a Halloween horror. One of the featured performers of the Ice Show cast is John Ledoux. He describes the Dantean Holocaust that seared the flesh of victims and the minds of witnesses.
This upheaval, this seated section of very thick concrete is probably an area of 400 or 500 people just lifted into the air and flew. And when I got my wits about me, I thought, well, this is no place to stand here under the set, which might go. So I started running backstage with my skates on and across the concrete. And by this time, everything had lit under the ice. I ran back to see a pillar of flame, probably 25 or 30 feet high, 5 or 10 feet through. Just a regular blast of flame. And people crawling over chairs, bodies out on the ice, utter havoc.
What was the reaction of the audience?
Well, their first reaction was just a few screams, a few yells. Most of them stood there horror-stricken. They couldn't move. And I don't know how they got out of the building. I imagine they just ran to any conceivable exit. I know I was fighting people trying to get back onto the ice. The audience were coming back to our set backstage, which is very dimly lit, through which eventually the fire engines and police came with their fire hoses. Going back to this one small area, maybe 40, 45, 50, or 100 feet diameter, things were strewn all over the place. Trying to get back to this fire to help, if possible, crawling up cement with skates on, not realizing I had them on. Suddenly there was another explosion as bad as the first, and of course the hole had already been made by that time up to the cement basement. But more fire, more flame came up, and at this point, as I found out later, one of our spotlight operators had come down from his spotlight and was trying desperately to get there to help. And he found one little boy whom he was trying to pull out, and the flame became so hot that it burned his arms and some of the hair off his head, I guess, not too much. But he finally had to let go and get out. And fortunately, there was no other explosion. It seems like seconds after that, there was a fire hose, I imagine, in minutes. Of course, time disappears at a time like that.
Well, John, I want to make it quite clear that I'm talking with you in General Hospital, where you've just donated blood. Wonderful thing, really. And I know that others of the company have been here, and many people who were not even there have been here. And I know that this community has responded beautifully, and we welcome your response, even though you're not a resident here.
It's a fine feather in the city of Indianapolis' cap, let's say it that way. See, as much as when we walked in the lobby of the hospital, so jammed we couldn't move. Just people who just come from all over to get blood. It's a wonderful reaction to such a tragedy.
As always, people skilled in handling disasters are in key roles when they happen. Fire Chief Arnold Phillips is such a man.
Well, when I first got in here, well, of course, naturally, there was people laying all over the ice, and, the seats towards it, the concrete there caved in on them, and this and that and the other, and I know we've got help from everybody. In fact, I just got a call just here a few minutes ago from Chicago. Chief Quinn called in and offered services down here, any equipment we needed, while you'd have it down here in a little bit. And the cause of it, well, it's all indications that is a gas explosion. I understand there is butane tanks in that concession room, which I understand is under this group of seats. As the number of people that have lost their life here, I don't know. I'll say it's going to be far beyond 50. It's very bad, I know that.
Chief, in your years of experience here in Indianapolis as a public servant, Can you recall any disaster equal to this?
This is the worst I've ever seen. I know we had a terrible explosion at Allison's quite a number of years ago where there was 8 lost their life. And then we had an explosion there at Butler. Of course, there was no loss of life, but the building was completely demolished. But this is the most terrible thing that I've ever seen.
Another man deeply involved at the smoke-filled Coliseum was Marion County Sheriff Robert Fields.
I think it's very well organized. Both the state police, the city police, and the sheriff's department were here just as soon as possible after the thing happened. And it's been very well organized altogether. I think, in my opinion, or I understand, it's the worst disaster that has ever occurred in Indianapolis. It's a great tragedy. People will be undoubtedly working here all night, maybe into tomorrow.
Sheriff, have you had any report from the hospitals as regards people who may have succumbed there?
Not in specific instances, but I understand there has been some.
And no idea yet on how many were injured?
The information I received is in excess of 200.
And as far as you're concerned now, everything that can be done is being done, and the situation is under control, even though it has been declared a disaster area.
I believe it appears to be under control at this time. I don't think there's any further danger. I think all the injured, everything's been done for them that can possibly be done for them. Of course, we have many things to do around here yet. Well, the rest of the night.
With any major disaster such as this one, there are always 2 major areas of action: the scene of the incident and hospitals in the area. We discussed the treatment of victims with Dr. Arvin Popplewell at General Hospital.
In the background, you may be able to hear a casualty list being read over a radio. This is not coming from the hospital, but being broadcast on the air as the radio and television stations attempt to ease minds and get the word out on who has been a fatality and serious injuries, this sort of thing. Dr. Popplewell, we've been very, very impressed with the way things have been going here at the hospital. Will you detail for us the system you've used and how your disaster plan has worked out?
Well, when the call came in for the disaster, the operator immediately called Dr. Jack Hickman, who has taken charge this evening. Then she called me, and I in turn had her call half a dozen key people. I came on out to the hospital, and by that time there were innumerable employees and volunteers who had come in. And a few of the casualties had just arrived into the emergency room by the time that I got here. The emergency room soon filled up with critically injured individuals, and so a triage of treatment areas was established, and patients were sorted as they came in. Those patients ordinarily being seen in the emergency room, unless they were critically ill, were sent home. And from that time on, it was a matter of a group of individuals working around each patient and getting them in shape so that they could be moved on out of the emergency room. A few minutes ago, I noticed a young fellow that's still critically injured, and there are 6 people working on him now. There were 6 people working on him when I arrived at the hospital. They were constantly fighting to keep him alive. And for the first time a few minutes ago, when we looked at him, it looked like he was making a little headway.
Doctor, I understand you stayed in radio contact with people at the scene, with the other hospitals, and that there's some effort to coordinate this whole program.
Yes, one of our big problems, of course, was having blood. And in the first place, we were short of blood here at General Hospital, been short for the past few months.